Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
It's good, Tony. We have another exciting day on the Ohio State beat. Ohio State has their early signing day. We've got Big Ten championship game coming up. Big exciting changes coming at Buckeye Scoop later this week. I mean, this is quite a day full of happenings.
It is Merry Recruitsmas to everybody on this wonderful white signing day. As I look outside, the snow is falling. Look at you behind you. The snow is falling, so it's very festive day as Ohio State signed all 21 of their commits today, and it was interesting. We talked to Ryan Day and Mark Pantoni, and when Pantoni was asked, "Hey, is there still room for more?" Obviously, knowing that Ohio State is still in trying to land JT Tuimoloau and maybe Rajon Davis out of who's committed to LSU, and he's like, "Well, we'll see if there's room, or we'll see what attrition has for us. Maybe we need to hit the portal." Like, yeah, attrition or not, if those two guys want to come to Ohio State, there's gonna be room. I suspect, right, Tom?
Yeah, and for people wondering, like, why would he not give a better answer than that? Like, okay, here's the rules of the NCAA on what coaches and staff can and can't say. Until a player signs a letter of intent, the coaches cannot speak the name of the player out loud or whatever to the media. They cannot say, "Boy, I hope we get JT Tuimoloau," or "Boy, I hope we get that really good defensive end from somewhere in the Northwest." Wink, and they would actually say wink in this case.
Yes.
And that's all against the rules. I think a secondary violation. It's one of those things that some coach at some point during every cycle does a whoops-a-daisies and says someone's name out loud, and that's even when they don't, we all know who you're talking about. It's fine. But yeah, and Pantoni is obviously not able to address whether they want JT Tuimoloau, but spoiler alert, yes, they do. He's also not able to address whether they want Rajon Davis, which, spoiler alert, also, yes, they do.
And I know, Tom, when the coaches do kind of accidentally say a name, you are one of the first people that immediately runs to compliance, to NARC, because you are a NARC.
Yes, the old Hugh Freeze. If you have any direct evidence of wrongdoing, I just email compliance@olemiss.edu just with everything. Like, I can't find my cell phone. Can you help me find it? Compliance@olemiss.edu, because that's the answer for everything.
Unfortunately, they can't find much, but they were able to find enough to get rid of Hugh Freeze. So that's a different recruiting topic. Let's stick with Ohio State's recruiting here today. And as it has been for many years, the talk of, when you talk about the class as a whole, or the talent, or what kind of players did you land, it's always about the culture and the proper fit. And I think that's real, because you want players that fit the culture and understand what is going to happen when they get here. One of the more interesting things for me about today and this entire class is not everybody has been on campus, and they have not been able to see the culture at work. They haven't been able to watch a practice. I remember Kendall Milton 2 years ago, watching a spring practice, standing next to J.K. Dobbins, watching what goes on and seeing what happens and seeing the work. And that was one of the things that Ryan Day and Mark Pantoni both said. It's been difficult to get people to experience, to see it, other than through Zoom. Although what Pantoni said is the group text with all of the, not just the commits, but some of the targets as well, they get to know each other and see the kind of people that are choosing to go to Ohio State. And through that, you also get an idea of the culture at Ohio State. And it's just one interesting side note too, with the real life Wednesdays and all of that, the different facets and aspects that players can experience when they visit. None of that is possible. So it either has to be virtual or word of mouth, or any other way you can. But it's interesting to me that they're buying in without getting to dive in first.
And this is a year when it's not like Ohio State is the only program that has not been able to have guys on campus. There have been programs that have been able to have guys visit for games. and they can't actually visit with the coaches, but they can at least go see the game. Like Emeka Egbuka went to Oklahoma a couple weeks ago. I think it was for the Baylor game, and got to see see a game in person and all of that. But he couldn't, they couldn't do the tour of the facilities. They couldn't do, the sit down with the coaches. The coaches didn't do an in-home visit. Like, this is not, Ohio State is in some ways at a disadvantage due to the Big Ten's recruiting rules this year, or the Big Ten's stadium rules and what have you this year. But in this way, like, everyone's kind of in the same boat. So, I think a lot of people are going into things a little more blind than they would have normally. But Trevion Henderson, for example, is one of those guys who couldn't come up for an official visit this year. He has not ever been on a visit to Ohio State, like to see the coaches and all that. But he came up during the Buckeye Bash that Jack Sawyer and his family organized for the Rutgers game, I think, one of the games this year. There were only 3 home games. You would think I would be able to remember, but it was one of the games this year. And so he was here for that. And, you start building a relationship. Like, you get to see the campus. That's fine. And you get to start building a relationship with the guys. Denzel Burke, who's a cornerback from Arizona, he's not been to Columbus. Like, he has not been to Columbus. Ryan Day had met with him in person at his high school at one point. He said kind of briefly, maybe like a year ago. And I mean, maybe this was when they were out there for the Fiesta Bowl. He met with Denzel Burke when he was out in Arizona. But I mean, you are kind of going in blind. And, with the resources that Ohio State has, I'm sure they're a little bit more able to express to people, like, this is what it's like, and put together like slick marketing stuff to show you what this is like, more so than other programs in the nation probably are. I mean, just look at the video production that Ohio State does versus a lot of other programs. And it's like, okay, that does not just happen for the stuff that's on Twitter. That's also for everything else that they do. So, this is something that in some ways levels the playing field, but when you have more resources and better people than other places, it ends up giving you an advantage anyway.
You mentioned Denzel Burke, and he was one of the guys that, if you just look at his highlights, it's half receiver and mostly receiver with some corner. And obviously the coaches look at more than just highlights. They have game tape. And Pantoni said that there wasn't a lot of defense to watch from Denzel Burke. And normally they wouldn't offer somebody unless they've had them in person and see how they put them through some movement drills and have Kerry Combs take a look at them. And so that's just one more aspect of you think you know what you're getting. But that's every recruiting class. You think you know what you're getting until you actually see them in games. But with Burke and just knowing that they needed a bunch of corners and you bring him in, and just not being able to look at him in person, and yet they still eventually decided, okay, because he was one of the guys that they weren't sure he was able to commit yet. They being recruiting guys weren't necessarily sure that he was able to commit. And then of course he got to go ahead, and now he's a Buckeye. And it's just one more weird aspect. And just the importance of the captains of the recruiting class that may eventually become future captains, like Day and Pantoni both cited Jack Sawyer, the defensive end out of Pickerington, and Jalen Johnson, the defensive back / possible linebacker out of Cincinnati, as 2 of the guys in Ohio who were really focused on building this class. And then Kyle McCord jumps aboard and takes it in, more national approach as well. Just the importance of having guys to build the class, because coaches can't go anywhere. All they can do is text and then Zoom and do that stuff. But it's the guys building the camaraderie, building the relationship, building the culture within themselves before they even get to Ohio State. And they, of course, every coach, I love this. This is a great recruiting class, but he was very emphatic, like at the end, like, don't be surprised if this group is a really, really special group. And it's because of just the way they've had to, what they've already been through together, and not being able to really go see Ohio State. Some have lost their seasons. Trevion Henderson, Jack Sawyer gave up his season. And so they've all been through their own separate ordeals, but they've been through it together, and that's brought them together. And it's some really interesting stories. We'll talk, I'm sure, about Evan Pryor and Trevion Henderson here in a bit with those 2. But just the culture is already being built from the outside. And then when you bring them in, it feels like they'll be able to rely on each other like every incoming class does.
Yeah, and there's always a question because literally every coach says, "We love this class. We got the guys who are the perfect fit for us." That's literally every coach. I just looked. Indiana, Lovie Smith just got fired at Illinois, so we're going to leave Illinois off. They are 14th in the Big Ten in recruiting right now. Indiana is 13th in the Big Ten, or maybe 12th. Maybe they're ahead of Purdue, but they're right near the bottom, either 12th or 13th. Here's Tom Allen talking about early signing day. Quote, "Really excited about the quality of the players. They fit with us off the field and the way they play the game with effort, skill, and talent." Close quote. Hyphen, literally every FBS coach today. That's what coaches say. If they get the 5-star guys, that's what they say. If they get the 2-star guys, that's what they say. We don't recruit to stars. We recruit to fit. We recruit to culture. That's what they say. That is what they all say. That is what they say. That is what Ryan Day said. It's universal. You can pre-write that story every year. What I think is interesting with this is they did have to lean on those players in a way that they normally don't. I mean, you always have the group texts and all that between the guys, and they're tweeting back and forth at each other. Like, that's every year. But this year, when they couldn't have in-home visits, when they couldn't bring guys to campus, when they couldn't go visit the high schools where these guys are, I mean, you can't do any of that stuff. So you're relying on the players to do so much more communication with the other players. That's, they're kind of deputizing those guys almost in an informal way. I mean, Pantoni talked about the fact that they do Zooms, and they had a couple times where they got the whole class together on Zoom and, did one where they kind of did like played a game. And then they had another one where they did like a little bit more of a serious conversation about the program and the culture and all that kind of stuff. But he said a lot of the stuff is just going on in group text. And when you have guys who are maybe wavering, thinking about visiting somewhere else, like someone in that group who's one of the leaders hits up the staff and just says, "Hey, just so you know, kind of their ears on the ground, to just let them know, like, hey, here's what's going on. Want to make sure you're aware of this." And you're relying on those guys to do so much more than you would during a typical cycle. But that probably does. This is probably going to be a year when the people who are bought in at Ohio State or at Penn State or at Indiana or at UTEP or whatever program you want, the guys who are bought in, who are the leaders, are probably going to be like even more the leaders coming in than they normally would be in a normal year. And there are probably going to be guys at a whole bunch of programs where the number of transfers after the first year goes up because you're going in a little bit more blind than you would normally. And that's just kind of an unavoidable byproduct of this year. But if you have that leadership class and it is a 5-star defensive end like Jack Sawyer and a 5-star quarterback like Kyle McCord and Jalen Johnson, who, I mean, they sure seem like they like Jalen Johnson a lot too. So if you have those guys who are kind of the leaders already, those are your guys who you're already going, okay, so 2023, go ahead and pencil those guys in as potential captains already. That's good. That's what you need. And you're probably going to have more high variance in all of your classes this year in terms of guys who are like way more bought in and who end up transferring. That's just going to be kind of a national thing probably this year. But, I mean, that's good. You need those guys, and your class is a whole lot better when you have a few of those guys than if it doesn't.
Absolutely. Many of the interesting things, one of them, I mentioned Travion Henderson and Evan Pryor, the two running back commits, and how those two became really close during this process. And the fact that they have to get close because it's not every day you sign two running backs in a class because you get one and the other's like, well, I want to be the 25 carry a game guy. And if there's two guys in the class, that means there's more competition. But of course, if you choose to go to Ohio State, it's not like the cupboard is going to be bare at any point. But these two guys have bought into playing together, enjoy the idea of like a 1A, 1B, where you get 13, 14, 15 carries per guy, and you do as much as you can with those. And the fact that you've got Tony Alford was upfront with everybody that he was recruiting. We're taking two guys this year. And so Travion Henderson, arguably the number one running back in the nation, ranked the number one running back in the nation, I believe, in the composite. and you're telling him we're going to bring somebody else in, and he's like, yeah, whatever. And then you're recruiting Evan Pryor, and you're like, hey, just so you know, like, we're probably going to bring in the number one running back in the nation, and he's cool with that too. And they're both explosive. Ryan Day said they're different, but they can each do the same thing. Said Pryor can be used in the passing game a little bit more, and Henderson is more of your every down back. But they're both, as Mark Pantoni said, fast, which is what you want out of that backfield. That's a phrase that Ohio State uses to mean I don't believe there's a level above fast. That's like, yes, you are legitimately fast with those two guys. And so I think everybody's looking forward to seeing that in action. I don't know how many carries or touches there will be for Evan Pryor next year, but clearly they love both guys. And those two have become like best friends from what we're told today. And you hope the patience remains, because it's going to be kind of a crowded room, and it's going to be tough for two freshmen, I would think, to make an impact there.
Well, the hope there, and Mark Pantoni talked about the fact that like you said, they told them right up in advance, like, we're taking two guys this year, so you're signing on knowing you're taking two guys this year. And Pantoni said, like, those guys are playing Madden live together, like, just playing Madden together online, like, every day. Like, they are like super good friends now. And the hope then is, that's a position where, yeah, you're going to have, sometimes you're going to have like the guy who is the guy, and sometimes you're going to be splitting carries. But the hope there is you develop the same kind of culture that the wide receiver room has over the years, where, they're excited for each other, they're rooting for each other, they're okay with splitting touches. If you don't have the mindset of, I've got to get mine, you have the mindset of, if one of us eats, all of us eats. Like, that's been very much the wide receiver mantra for a number of years. Go back to Paris Campbell, Terry McLaurin, Johnny Dixon, even before them. I mean, that's just that has always been the mindset of that room. If you have that running back thing where it's not, if that guy's getting carries, that means I'm not getting carries. If it's, if you can get guys to buy into the, hey, it is probably not a bad thing as a college running back to not have a million carries on your body before you go to the NFL. Like, that is, if you are not an Alabama running back who's going to the NFL with, whatever, 500 career carries and, all the treads off the tire already, like, that's probably not a bad thing, actually. So, yeah, I mean, you hope that culture kind of pervades the running back room as well in the future as it has in the wide receiver room.
I go back to Johnny Dixon and Terry McLaurin. There was one game where Johnny Dixon already had a touchdown, and he pulled himself out of the game and set Terry McLaurin in so Terry could get a touchdown. Just that kind of unselfishness that's from the culture. And yeah, you'd think that they're certainly saying the right things as of now. I think maybe my favorite anecdote from the day was Mark Pantoni talking about during this season. What he does is he gets into the office early on Saturday mornings to cut up tape from Friday night high school games. And he's not the only one. His staff gets in there on Saturday mornings. And he said it's kind of a fight at times to get to be the one to cut the Reed Carrico tapes, because the film there, because it's so fun to watch. And he's just all over the place making plays. And just as we talked about him the other day, where he's just what you would expect from an Ohio linebacker, and who just makes plays, is involved in everything, does everything the right way. Still a very good athlete, but very hard-nosed, blue-collar guy that you can rely on, you can trust, you don't have to worry about him. And like a tough Borland, you just set him and forget him, basically, and wind him up. And I don't know that you need to wind him again. He just goes. And so just interesting that, yeah, it's like they love him, love watching him, love putting the film together. And there's always plenty of highlights to cut when he's on the field.
I was about to say he seems like the kind of guy who's going to be a fan favorite, and then you comped him to Tough Borland, and I was like, I did say to Alex Gleitman on the Morning Scoop one of the days earlier this week, like he gets the award for most likely to murder someone on kick coverage sometime next year. Like, he's just the goes 1,000 miles an hour, big hitter, linebacker, like that. That is you just remember like Taraja Mitchell's true freshman year. There is one play that everyone remembers from Taraja Mitchell's true freshman year, and it was him just obliterating someone in kickoff coverage. And that's probably what Reed Carrico will do first year. And he's another one of those guys who just sort of fits the mold of the guy who's probably a captain 3 years from now, and the guy who can run the defense and be the one who kind of knows what everyone's job is and all of that. The other guy who was interesting in terms of film was a story about how they found Zen Michalski, who's the offensive lineman from Indiana. He was committed to Louisville, and Pantoni said he at one point, I think during the quarantine, just basically told his staff, like, okay, you have the ACC, you have the SEC, you have the Big 12, you have the Pac-12, like just go through, like assign people a conference, and said, watch all the commits from these conferences and see if there's anyone we should be going after who we don't know about. And Zane, I think, was the guy who had the ACC, and said, watch the Zen Michalski tape. And it was like, I think there might be something here. And he brought it to Pantoni's attention, and Pantoni watched it and was like, I think there might be something here. And, this is hard. They did not get to go watch him play in person. They always, guys who are maybe, not like an absolute no-brainer offer right off the top, they want to see those guys in person. So that's why, when you talk about guys who come to camp to earn an offer, that's the kind of person we're talking about. They obviously didn't have camps this summer in the way they normally would. They weren't able to go scout games in person this fall in the way they normally would. So that makes it a little more difficult. But, Zane brought it to Pantoni. Pantoni brought it to Stud, and Stud went, yeah, all right, well, let's do that. And he's someone who Michalski had put on, I think, what did he say? Put on 40 pounds this year?
60 to 70. 60
to 70 pounds. Yeah. Who among us? Who among us this year, friends?
Quarantine, man.
Yeah. I think he put on good weight. I think that was my vibe anyway, that Michalski put on good weight.
He used to be a wide receiver.
Yeah. So that was I thought that was kind of an interesting story. And, this is one of these years where it's like, yeah, everyone is having to deal with all the same. This is Ryan Day's mantra. Like, everyone has to deal with basically the same stuff, and you make the best of it, and you just have to do it better than everyone else does. And that, I think that's one of those good find, good get kind of things that, if he turns into something several years from now, like that's a really cool story and a good find.
Yeah, Tom, you have to do everything better than everybody else, or just take Louisville's commits. Come on.
See, the problem with taking Louisville's commits is the bulk of them are probably not Ohio State caliber commits, which is why they're Louisville commits.
That's true. Like I keep saying with Michigan, as long as you're recruiting against like Purdue and UMass, the record will reflect Purdue and UMass.
Well, when you're recruiting as much in Massachusetts, you're going to bump into UMass on the trail. That's just the cost of doing business.
Cost of doing business. You mentioned Michalski. They took 3 offensive linemen. Ryan Day said he thinks all 3 of them can play tackle. As you know, Tom, we've said the same thing about Donovan Jackson, and Ryan Day just continues to confirm that he is a listener of the show. So good class coach this year. And yes, we all agree with us that Donovan Jackson could certainly play tackle if need be, but he likes the versatility of the entire offensive line class with Ben Crispin as well, who I think you had Alex Gleitman on the Morning Scoop the other day, and he said Crispin could play all 5 positions if you need him to, and that's the kind of versatility that you can win with. So that was obviously not getting J.C. Latham is probably the biggest problem with this class. If we're going to look for a flaw, that would be it, because there's really, no other flaws per se, because you can't fault defensive end when you got Jack Sawyer, the number 1 player there. Could they stand to add another? Sure. Could they stand to add another defensive tackle? Yes, but you've got 2 really good ones. But I think losing out on Latham when you had him almost wrapped up is the biggest miss of the class for me.
Yeah, and just if you don't know, Latham is a 2-star or 5-star tackle, number 2 player overall in the class. He was going to IMG Academy. I had Alex on the morning show earlier this week, and he was sort of explaining the story there. And the short version is that when IMG shut down, Latham went to go live with his mom, who lives in one state, instead of his dad, who lives in another state. And his dad was I think, strongly in favor of Ohio State, and it looked like he was all but done to go to Ohio State, and they went to live with his mom, and his mom was not in favor of Ohio State and was in favor of Alabama instead. And TLDR, he signed with Alabama today. So these things happen, especially in a pandemic. So, I mean, that's a tough miss, and it's one of those things where you can't, that there's a little bit of that's outside of Greg Stabara's purview, out of his control.
You should have worn a mask, Tom.
Yeah. I mean, that's tough. They've missed on a couple guys that were kind of big 5-star type guys in the last couple of years, and it's like, that's Jackson Carman was one of those, like, that's going to sting a little bit. And any one of these things individually is not a huge issue. Like, you can miss on one guy here and there, and that's a problem. It's when you miss on a whole bunch of guys a whole bunch of years in a row. And I think the offensive line class, like, they have a 5-star offensive lineman in this class in Donovan Jackson. So, the offense, and Ben Chrisman's a top 100 guy, and obviously they're very happy with Zed Mahalski. So, you've got 3 guys. This did not need to be a 6 offensive lineman class like it was a year earlier. So I think they're happy with it. Ryan Day gave it an A. But that's just one of those things. Like, if you didn't get your guy this year, you really got to get one next year. That Larry Johnson is getting a 5-star defensive end at least every other year. You got to keep stacking these guys in terms of offensive line, because they got Paris Johnson last year, who was a 5-star guy. Okay, so this was your year where you kind of got a little bit of a freebie for missing. You miss out on one. Okay, you got to get one next year, because you got one in 2017 in Nick Petit Frere. Was he 18?
He was
17. Was 18. He 18? This is his.
Yes,
this is his third year, 2018. So you got Nick Petit Frere in 2018. So now this is his third year. You're probably getting him. They should have him back next year, presumably. You got Paris Johnson. You got some other guys there. So, and DeJuan Jones. Like, you've got bodies there. But then after next year, Nick Petit Frere is probably gone, and you need to have someone else who is ready to step in to be the guy after the guy. So that's just offensive line is one of those positions that you just kind of have to keep an eye on. And just like defensive tackle with Michigan or with Ohio State a few years ago when they missed on a couple defensive tackles in a row, or defensive backs in recent years, like, if you have a couple years in a row where you miss on your guys, it all of a sudden catches up with you, and that's not something you can just fix overnight. So that's just that's one of those, just like when you go to the dentist and it's like, that's not a problem. We put a note in your chart. We're just going to keep an eye on that. Like, that's what that is.
And getting 3 this year is okay, as long as the guys they got last year mostly pan out. And that's like Jacob James and Trey LaRue, the lower ranked guys. But then, as we saw, like, it can. Max Ray, this is his 3rd or 4th year, and he played well in his start. And sometimes, if you're just patient with the guys, even if they're not playing, maybe they're good enough to play. And so these guys will be redshirting, improving, working, and then maybe when they're thrust into action, they'll be okay. The versatility is going to be key there with these 3, and wherever they're needed, they should be able to go. I don't know how much any of the 3 will be needed per se next year, when there are still a lot of guys from last year's class and beyond where there are bodies, but everybody obviously will have an opportunity. In terms of opportunities, Tom, Kyle McCord coming, the quarterback, 5-star quarterback out of Philly, enrolling early, will be here next month, and Ryan Day said he will absolutely have a shot to compete for the quarterback job. And the fact that the guys already on campus have a grand total of 0 passing attempts, I believe, means that there's the advantage that they have, obviously, over McCord is practice time and just being around for a year. And so there's that, but nothing can replicate playing in games. And so it'll be up to McCord to catch up quickly and then try to make it a competition in the spring and then in the fall. But he's going to have every opportunity to start, and it will be interesting to watch. Tom, hope maybe we'll get to see some spring football. I don't know. Maybe-ish, but probably not. maybe through some Twitter and some video and stuff like that. But he's going to be involved.
Yeah, and I mean, Day was real definitive. I mean, the exact quote from him is, "That is going to happen. He will compete for the job." It's like, so you're telling me there's a chance? Like, that was pretty unambiguous from Ryan Day, and that's very clearly what Kyle McCord's expectation is coming into the year, is that he's coming in early to win the job. It's not like, oh, I'm going to try and I'm going to knock out all my university required 101 level classes. Like, no, he's coming to Ohio State to knock out his 101 level undergraduate classes and also win the starting job. Those two things all at once. Watch out for Bio 101. Just saying.
The lecture is so large you don't even have to go, so don't worry about that.
See, that's what you have to watch out for, is that idea. That's what you have. It's not the class is hard. It's yes. Yes, anything in Independence 100 or Hitchcock 131. Watch out for those, because the temptation will come up to get you.
And the thing about those buildings, those rooms, they're so good to sleep in. I mean, the topics are always nap worthy, and there's just, it's not like the professor's going to see you, but then they also have like minions walking up and down the aisles at times,
Well, and the professors have minions, but also Ohio State football has people who are checking on people in class, which I did not have as an undergraduate. Yeah, so
that's true.
Anyway, back to football.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's going to be interesting to see, because yes, Jack Miller and CJ Stroud come in with a year of working with Mickey Marotti, and I mean, that is a rude awakening for everyone when they go from a beloved commit who's getting hugged every time they walk into the building to a guy who's getting yelled at by Mickey Marotti at 5:45 in the morning. Like, that is a wake up call in probably a couple different ways, and
that's why they call it de-recruitment.
Yes. In recruiting, you're told how great you are, and as soon as you get to campus, you are told how not great you are and how far you have to come. And they do. I mean, that's the thing. Like, nobody walks on campus like 100% ready to play. And, that's something that we have heard about with other prospects who Ohio State was going after, basically being told, like, yeah, you're going to start first year. Like, Ohio State does not tell people that. They tell you, you can compete to start. You can compete for a job. Some freshmen are able to earn their way on the field. You're not going to be told, like, yes, you're going to start. That is not how it works at Ohio State. Because if you tell someone that and then they're not ready, which most freshmen are not ready, and that's not a reflection on freshmen, that's a reflection on the fact that, like, yeah, if you're going against guys who have been in a college weight program for 3 or 4 years and you're coming from high school, like, yeah, those guys could be bigger, faster, and stronger than you. Like, that is how things are. And there's a lot to learn in terms of the playbook and all that kind of stuff. So if you promise someone, like, you will start from day one, either you play someone who may or may not actually be ready to play, in which case you probably create a whole bunch of dissension in your locker room. Like, why are you playing this dude who's not as good as the people who have been around longer? Or you tick off the guy who just got to campus and you told would do one thing and then didn't. I mean, this is, as with everything, let's go back to EA Sports NCAA 14. You could promise guys playing time, but then if you didn't live up to your promises, or you're giving them the right jersey number or whatever, that came back to bite you, and you hurt yourself in recruiting in the future. Like, this is all in, there was no sowing discontent in the locker room setting in that game, but that's an issue that you would have in real life. So that's why they can't do it. You don't want to promise anyone, because the culture is you have to earn it. So if you're just given something, you're not earning it.
Do you remember Demetrius Summers, the South Carolina running back, when Lou Holtz was still the coach there? Summers was the number 1 running back in the nation. It was a 2003 class. I'm just looking. And he said, if you sign with us, we'll start you game 1. And he started game 1. And I'm just reading, like, 4 years ago, by the way, he was sentenced to 8 years of prison. But just an idea that, when you give somebody something that they don't earn through recruiting, maybe that's not the best way to get them on the right path, perhaps. But yeah, I always think about him when a recruit is promised that they will start, and I'm also thinking, like, well, what if John Cooper looks at Orlando Pace and says, "Hey, buddy, you're not. I can't guarantee you're going to start. You're probably not going to start." And Orlando Pace is like, "Okay, let's just see what happens. All right, let's just go practice and see what happens, and see if maybe you don't change your mind."
I will make the disclaimer that we always make. The Orlando Pace exception is that no one else is Orlando Pace. That is the thing about Orlando Pace. No one else is Orlando Pace. So,
and nobody ever will be, despite the sometimes lofty comparisons. Any other things that stood out, Tom, as I'm looking through here? Emeka Egbuka, one of the things that Ryan did mention about him, 4.0 student, as he mentioned a few times, which just gives you another idea of the student athlete aspect of this. And he's the guy that I know. When you talk about the standouts, obviously he's going to be one of them on offense. I think he can play anywhere. They're going to train him for whatever, as they do with all of their receivers. But they identified him early on, building the relationship with Brian Hartline. It's just interesting and he was on campus twice. You got some photos of him last year, and so this has not just been something that has been. This has taken some time to get to know him, and like I said, they identified him early, and it's been a lot of work. And anytime you can go to Washington and bring somebody in, it's like you're not just doing it to do it. Like it has to be worth the effort, and they sure think he's going to be worth that effort.
Well, they had not brought in a scholarship player from the state of Washington since Kevin Griffin in the 1990s, like late 1990s. And Kevin Griffin was related to Archie Griffin. So there was a little bit of a tie in there. You may remember Archie from the 1970s. He was a running back of some acclaim. And
did he play with Pete Johnson?
Yes, he was the guy who was behind Pete Johnson, literally behind him in the, yes. Kevin Griffin was, I believe, his nephew, and did not win 2 Heismans. He fell two Heisman short of his uncle Archie, but that was okay. He was the most recent player from the state of Washington. And then last year,
the family averaged about more than, a quarter of a Heisman when you consider all of the other Griffins.
I was going to say Ray Griffin. There were several Griffins in the 1970s. So yes, they were above half a Heisman per person, which is it's pretty good. That was the last time they brought in a kid from the state of Washington until last year when they brought in G. Scott Jr. He came in, he's a true freshman this year, and was a top 100 wide receiver, if I remember right. I don't think he was a 5-star, but he was, a high 4-star receiver from Washington, which is a place that you got to go work it. Like this is not the, the pipeline where it's like, well, Ohio State has gotten 3 other guys from this high school. And so, they're telling, Garrett Wilson is telling the people who are at Lake Travis High School right now, like, oh yeah, this is great. And, that makes it an easy sale. So you break that new ground with G. Scott last year, bring in Emeka Egbuka this year. Again, this is a Brian Hartline special. Brian Hartline has a lot to sell. Brian Hartline can, we see him go out there during practice and just like throw he's got receiver gloves in his pocket all the time because sometimes he'll just throw the receiver gloves on and go out there and run a route. It's not, no disrespect to Greg Madison. I don't see Greg Madison getting down in 3-point stances all that often.
Oklahoma drill once, we saw it in the spring.
Yeah. Old man strength, man. He's dominated. But no, Brian Hartline is like a very likable, charismatic dude. Like he's like, you talk to Brian Hartline, he's one of those, there are assistant coaches who were like, we do interviews with them and it's like, okay, well, this is going to be what it is. Brian Hartline is one of those where it's like, this is going to be an entertaining few, 15 minutes or whatever it is that we get with him. And so between his playing career, his NFL career, where he made some money, he can tell you like, this is how you make whatever he made, $30 million, $50 million in the NFL. Cause I can tell you that because I did it myself. And then I can go out on the practice field and show you how to do it. When I say run a route like this, here's what I mean. Throws gloves on hands and runs route. Like those guys all love playing for him. So yeah, that was a Brian Hartline special. And now they've gotten 2 very highly rated receivers out of the state of Washington, and they're hoping to land another player from out there in February or March or April or sometime next year.
But we have no idea who that would be or whether, you can't speak his name. So yes, 3 receivers in this class, Jaden Ballard and Marvin Harrison Jr., along with Emeka Egbuka. That gives Brian Hartline, along with the 2022 commit Caleb Burton, Hartline has landed or has received a commitment or signed 10 wide receivers now at Ohio State. The lowest ranked is number 93, Mookie Cooper, Marvin Harrison Jr., number 91. And so, yes, 10 top 100 receivers in that span. Half of them 5-star guys. Not bad, in my opinion. Tom, you may differ. Would you care to differ?
Well, I was just thinking that how weird it will be if Ohio State is back in the Big Ten championship game next year for Marvin Harrison Jr. to go play a game in a stadium where his name, thanks to his dad, is literally on the wall of the stadium in the Ring of Honor. Like that's going to be, I'm sure that's going to be both cool and weird because I'm sure he grew up going to games there. So that'll be quite a trip for him, I would imagine. A couple of other things that I thought were interesting. Pantoni said the toughest position to evaluate is corner, because a lot of times if you're a really good athlete, they don't have you playing corner because then you're on this one wide receiver who a lot of times the quarterback can't make the throw anyway, or the wide receiver is not that good. So you're kind of getting wasted out there. So, and he said the other thing is sometimes the film's like zoomed in, so you can't actually watch the corners. Like you're just watching the ball. It's not like a true all 22. But I mean, as you mentioned the Denzel Burke story already, that they don't take a corner unless a coach has seen the guy in person, and they made an exception for Denzel Burke this year. But I did think that was an interesting question. The other question that I don't know if there was a contest about who asked the best question today, but this might have won it. It was, what would derail things if this was to get derailed at some point, and Pantoni didn't answer that, which is probably smart. But he did say that winning is a great recipe for recruiting, and as long as they keep bringing in kids who are like strong cultural fits, who understand the culture, they'll have success. And he said, recruits see the success that previous players have had in terms of getting to the NFL. That helps sell the program too. So, the fact that NFL guys are going to the NFL helps bring in better recruits. Bring in better recruits helps get more guys to the NFL. It's just a cycle. It is just, at this point, it's just a machine. And, unless someone jams something in the gears, it seems like it's on track to keep going for at least a little while longer.
Yeah. Pantoni said the head coach always drives the train. And right now with Urban Meyer and Ryan Day, you've got two guys who are driving it, who really, really enjoy recruiting, who understand what the result of that recruiting can be. And yeah, I don't want to say it's perpetual motion as in like there's no actual effort inside the machine, because there certainly is like constant effort. I don't want to belittle anybody's job here,
Tony. On this podcast, we obey the laws of thermodynamics.
So there is that. Just looking through here, scrolling through here. I mean, it's amazing the amount of people they have working on this stuff. Whether it's like handing out conferences to go and okay, now you go look at this and see what you can find, and then there's the social media aspect. The people who host recruits, I mean, I don't know what they did this year. Just took it easy. There may have been actually some furloughs. I don't know, but like it's only going to get bigger now that the transfer portal is what it is. You're going to have the one-time get out of jail free card with the transfers coming, and that's going to be a whole nother issue. And it's just I hope Mark Pantoni and the guys enjoyed this kind of year where we got nothing to do. Let's go and see all of the recruits in the ACC. Let's go see the commits. Let's see all of the commits in the Big 12. And because it's going to be a while, I think, before they have that time, unless they get a larger staff to do that again, because I think it's a pretty interesting idea and way of thinking. And I know Urban and Pantoni have always been like, well, who has Michigan State offered? Who has Wisconsin offered? Because they respect their ability to see that talent and then develop it. And, it's not stealing if the players come willingly. Because if they don't, that's then kidnapping.
Yes, that's kidnapping. Don't do that. But yeah, you can cheat off Wisconsin paper. That's all right. That's not the worst idea in the world.
Is this a cheese stain?
Pantoni compared this year's recruiting cycle a little bit to car commercials.
Yeah.
He said I thought that was a funny analogy where he said, normally when you're buying a car, you watch the commercial and you're like, oh, that looks interesting. And you go take a test drive. This year, with things being where no one could go on campus and no one could, you couldn't go see games and all that kind of stuff. He said, like, there are guys who just are buying off of the commercial. And, they have not gotten a chance to test drive a game day at Ohio State because no one got to test drive a game day at Ohio State this year. So that's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out with this class in terms of, I mean, he talked about it in terms of they had to really just buy into the culture and not be going because it's an exciting place to go watch a football game or to go play a football game. Like you really had to buy in for the cultural reasons. But it is going to be interesting to see just nationally, like what that does, that all these guys are going someplace where they haven't seen a game for a year. They haven't been on campus for close to a year. Like that's a real leap of faith. And it'll be interesting to see how that manifests itself, a year, 2 years, 3 years from now in terms of transfers and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think everybody's preparing for an eventual. The transfer portal is going to be very busy over these next 3 years as the fallout from this recruiting cycle happens. I mean, you think you know what you're getting into when you go visit a campus, but then you don't really until you're there and you find out, you know what, I don't really like it here. This place doesn't have any good delis, because I know that's one of the things that recruits like. The pastrami sandwiches.
That was a Luke Whippler thing last year. He talked about the fact that they couldn't get a good bacon, egg, and cheese in Columbus and
McDonald's.
Yeah, don't let Luke Whippler hear you say that. He will not take kindly to that.
But yeah, I mean, with the one-time transfer exemption, it's easier to transfer now. It is the stigma is no longer what it once was, and it's just very easy to do and to just go find something better. So anything else? I know they really our guy Mark Givler was asking about the Ohio class, and Mark seems to think that this is a pretty good Ohio class. I don't know.
What does that guy know?
Yeah, and so that's what he was asking Ryan Day and Mark Pantoni, and they both agreed. But like I said, I've seen better. And they were very instrumental in building this class, and it's always the backbone, as Pantoni said, of the class of recruiting is Ohio. And every year we ask, did you get enough Ohio guys? And this year, that question was not asked. So I'm guessing people must have thought they got enough Ohio guys.
Seems right. How many Ohio guys did they get this year? Was it more than previous years? Because the previous year, I think the low was like
8. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the low was like 6, maybe 5 or 6 one year. So it's more than they have in the past. And it may also be like they got the right Ohio guys. They got they got all the Ohio guys they were really going hard after. The only guy in Ohio, the only guy in Ohio that they offered that I think didn't come was Lorenzo Styles, who's a wide receiver who went to Notre Dame.
Devontae Smith decommitted.
Devontae Smith did decommit and go to Alabama. That's right. I forgot about him. But yeah, they had they got the bulk of the Ohio guys, which Pantoni talked about the fact that's the backbone of every class is you bring those Ohio guys in, you get them in early, then they can help be your recruiters. They're the guys who are not gonna if you bring in someone from Florida or California or something, like they probably have not been a lifelong Ohio State fan who has dreamed of this day since they were 6 years old, and like you bring in a kid from Pickerington, like that kid's probably not going to decommit. That kid is probably going to, once he commits, like they said, like they have that conversation, like, okay, when you commit, that's it. Like they are not here for game players. They don't want to have the guy who commits and then 2 weeks later decides I'm going to take some visits. Like no, we're not doing that. So yeah, those Ohio guys, they bring them in. They're kind of the backbone of that class, and they're kind of steady, and then they can start being recruiters to bring in other guys as well.
A couple of other things, the Zen Michalski thing, when they're looking at it, Pantoni was like, everybody's watching the tape and they're going, what are we missing here? Why are we the only ones in Louisville who are after this kid right now, or why don't they have offers? And it's interesting how you have to have confidence in your own ability to scout players. And you talked about that with Michael Hall, where they were one of the first guys on him. And then he started to blow up and become a national recruit. And that you've got to have, first of all, you've got to have good scouts that have, as Urban would say, there's theory and there's testimony. And Ohio State has a lot of testimony when it comes to their scouting, their ability to scout, and Pantoni specifically. And obviously his staff is, he trusts them. And it's just, it's interesting to me that you have to have guys that you can't just, well, let's just see who the top 100 is and we'll go get them. It's like, well, you'll get some of them, but then it's the back half of the class that determines, I think, your depth, your ability to overcome problems, because that's when you look at Michigan's class. Yeah, top half, we'll get them into the top 10 of the recruiting rankings. It's the bottom half that keeps them out of the top 10 of the actual rankings. And I think it will be for a while. And so as long as you are scouting and developing well, those 3 stars become 5 stars on the field. And that's something that Ohio State has been able to do. Michigan, not so much.
Well, that's where the depth in your program comes from. And then, I mean, I can't even count how many times we've said that the difference between Ohio State and a lot of the teams they play is that second level. Like everyone has, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, like they all have, they're all bringing in 2, 3 top 100 players a year at least. Ohio State's bringing in like 10. So there's one difference. But also, you go through the bottom half of the class and Ohio State's bringing in a bunch of, guys in the 200s and 300s, not guys in the 600s and 700s. And, again, recruiting rankings are not your, an unavoidable destiny. You can be a Pat Elflein or a Devon Hamilton and be the 900 and whatever ranked player and turned into a starter and a NFL draftee and all of that. But, that's where the depth comes in, is that they're bringing in guys who you can, when you're missing 3 starters on your offensive line and sliding another guy over to a new spot, you can still go on the road to Michigan State and just absolutely mash them into the ground. Like that's where that depth comes in. One interesting note just broke. The Ohio State North Carolina game has now been replaced with the Ohio State UCLA game at the CBS Sports Classic. This is in the shooty hoops, not football. But this weekend, North Carolina will face Kentucky instead, followed by Ohio State and UCLA at 4:15 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. Revised schedule was created to more closely align COVID-19 testing protocols between the competing programs and their respective conferences.
North Carolina is ducking Ohio State.
Yes. Well, we know North Carolina hasn't been great about testing for a number of years, so you have to be careful there. Yes, I wonder if this also means Ohio State will draw a Pac-12 team in the college football playoff. Boy, I bet they wouldn't mind that.
Yeah, I'm sure they would be all for that. Colorado, maybe something like that.
Pac-12 All-Star team, I think they'd probably be fine with that.
The traveling Pac-12 All-Stars. One other thing, non-recruiting related, that Day said he was asked if Ohio State should make the playoffs if they're 6-0. Basically, campaign for your team because everybody's campaigning against them, and it basically said, we've had always felt we have a special team, but we've never been at full capacity. We can play with anybody in the country. And then he added, now we've got to do that on Saturday. Obviously. It's like, yes, no, Saturday has not been forgotten. And so that's where you have to prove it most. But he did say that if some people can't see how special the team is, the quote is, then that's their problem. And it is true, Tom. If they can't respect the Buckeyes, then that's their problem. And then, of course, it's up to Ohio State to then make those people look like idiots. And if they don't, then that's Ohio State's problem.
Yes, it's someone else's problem right until they say someone else's name in the during that first 4, and then it becomes Ohio State's problem pretty significantly. But yeah, I mean, I give Day credit. Like, you don't need to. I'm not sure that anyone really is swayed by coaches lobbying for their team, because it's like, I mean, just like every coach thinks their recruiting class is a perfect fit, and it's a bunch of guys who really buy into the culture, and this may shock you. I cannot remember a single time going back to the start of the college football playoff when a team that was considered in the running for the college football playoff thought that the argument that should be made for who should be included was not the one that favored their team. It's, when you're the hottest team, you think it's the team that's playing the best right now. That's the team. You can't worry about how it happened in September. It's who's the hottest team now. And if you're the team that has the best wins, it's, we've beaten the best teams. And if you're the team who has had a bad loss, well, that shouldn't be held against you. That's not what this is about. This is about who's playing best now. Like, it's just, you almost just have to filter it out. Like, it's great for headlines, and it's great for getting people to write all caps tweets on Twitter about, why this is the worst thing in the history of the world. But ultimately, I don't know if it really moves the needle. And I honestly kind of appreciate Day not falling into that.
I don't know. I would have liked to seen him take a shot at Clemson. Like, oh, Clemson's lost. They've played too many games.
They haven't beat us for 11 months now.
So, yeah, like just go ahead and take a shot. Take a shot at Alabama too. Like they play in a crappy, conference. I'd like to see Alabama run through the Big Ten like we have in 5 games. Let's see Alabama do that. I bet they couldn't because again, Tom, as I say when we can throw out predictions for the Michigan game, we can't be proven wrong. So whatever you want, just say whatever you want. Like, Alabama would be lucky to be 3-2 right now in the Big Ten.
Anyway, thanks for joining us here on Outkick. Oh, I said that with my out loud voice, didn't I? How about that? Well, these things happen. Yes, Alabama for sure. I mean, how many wins does Alabama have over Penn State this year? None. If Penn State's 3-5 only because they're playing in the dominating Big Ten East. If they were playing in the SEC West, obviously 8-0. I mean, prove me wrong.
Yeah.
Can't. Science.
There you go. Anything else, Tom? Do you have any other hot takes? Any other science takes? Anything else on recruiting that we haven't touched on? Anything like that we might want to finish up with? I was disappointed that Jansen Dunn didn't get talked about enough. I know everybody here at the Scoop really, really likes him, and it's just unfortunate that we didn't get a chance to ask Brian Day, like, hey, don't you like him as much as we do?
Well, that was he's a player who I think our audience is probably pretty familiar with because I'm just looking the Buckeye Scoop account 50 minutes ago tweeted out who is the most underrated recruit in Ohio State's 2021 class. 49.2% said Jansen Dunn over Zen Michalski and Jalen Johnson and other. So yeah, I think our audience is probably pretty familiar with Jansen's work, and he's someone who Alex said on the Morning Scoop earlier this week. I asked him like who's the guy who's going to be the lower ranked guy who really pops, and that was his name. Pretty sure Mark and Bill have mentioned him as well. Usually when those 3 guys all think the same thing, they're probably right. So I will also say Jansen Dunn because I am smart and I know how to, just like Ohio State and Wisconsin offensive linemen, I know how to copy off the smart kids' papers.
There you go. All right. I think that'll do it then. Is that correct?
That'll do it. I can plug Thursday morning's Morning Scoop. Going to have Ross Fulton on, do a little Thursday Chalk Talk, previewing the Ohio State Northwestern game. We normally do those on Tuesday. It's usually looking backwards, but there was no game. So since we could not diagram up the flow of COVID through the Michigan locker room, we will instead look forward to the Ohio State Northwestern game, what the Wildcats may try and do against Ohio State in a game that, I mean, Ohio State probably needs to win with a little bit of gusto. Wouldn't be, Ohio State winning that game by 30 points would probably be better for them than winning it by 3 points. So that'll be, that's always an interesting and fun conversation. And speaking of copying off the smart kids' papers, I always enjoy talking to Ross.
Yeah, no, I agree. You'll learn something each time, or have your own, what I like best, have your own thoughts confirmed. Like, hey, I am smart. Who knew?
Me. I think, Ross, help me out here. Should they play DeJuan Jones at tailback? Ross is like, anyway, I gotta go, man. I don't. Is that a yes? All right, talk to you next week, bud.
I knew it. I knew they should play him there. All right, that will do it. Thank you all for listening. Make sure to check out BuckeyeScoop.com right now. There's plenty of analysis on the class. I know Alex has thrown something out there. Bill Green has as well. I think Mark has something coming as well. So just a bunch of, Alex Gleitman wrote about some superlatives. Bill Green's given his thoughts. And there's a bunch of stuff there. Also, everything from Ryan Day and Mark Pantoni there, as well as video. So check it out. And if you're not yet a member, now is a pretty good time. There's still a bunch of stuff going on in the world of Ohio State. So be sure to join, check that out, see if you like it. I bet you will. And if you don't, just keep trying. And you will. All right. Just trust me. So do that. And we will talk to you guys later.